Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. They're going overtime at an EU summit in Brussels. It's an EU summit with Turkey. And following that summit for us is France 24's Cyril Vanier, who's been telling us about that unprecedented offer for a one-for-one swap, sending back all migrants and asylum seekers across the agency, and in exchange, Europe would take in, for each person sent back, one Syrian refugee. We're also in the company from Ankara of Başak Yavcan, who teaches at TOBB University. Welcome back as well to Emre Demir, editor of the newspaper Zaman France, the French language edition of Zaman, and François Zaman, lecturer at Sciences Po. And just before the break, we're talking about Syrian refugees, François. But what happens under this deal to Iraqis, Afghans, Eritreans?
Well, it's unclear. At the moment, the deal is only with Turkey, and we can imagine that Iraqis or Eritreans or West Africans will use other routes to come to Europe. They might come through Libya or through Algeria, through Senegal. There are many, many routes. And what is important to understand when we discuss the opening and the closing of migration routes is that for every route that you close down, a new route will open. So if you close down the Balkan route, as this is being discussed at the moment, there is a strong risk that a new route will open. And the Balkan route is way safer than a route that would go through sea in the Adriatic Sea, for example. So what I'm concerned with is the possibility that a new route might open between Corfu and Brindisi, for example, which would be much more dangerous, much more riskier than the Balkans route, which is relatively safer because it is on land rather than on sea. Plus, if you close the Balkans route, the risk is to further isolate Greece and to consider Greece really as the dump zone where the EU dumps the refugee that it doesn't want to accept.
All right, reactions coming in, and not all of them kind to the Turkish government. Gabrielle on Twitter: we should not get involved in the blackmail trick Turkey is trying with the refugee crisis that's been caused by Merkel. Başak Yavcan, your reaction to that viewer's opinion?
I understand actually the concerns in Europe, and it looks like the European public opinion is forced to think of a hierarchy of migrants. Should we take Turks over Syrians, or should we take Syrians over Turks? But at the end of the day, as I suggested, this is an issue this is an imminent issue that requires immediate attention. And at the end of the day, these people are on the move. And actually, it's not this year only, this last summer only. Turkey has been receiving refugees from Syria over 5 years, and investing over, the government's figures are about $8 to $10 billion to refugees. So these things should also be taken into consideration when public opinion on this issue is formed. And I think there is a lot left to policymakers, to elites, when they're talking about this issue. It's really a dangerous road to politicize and securitize immigration issue. And it should be considered that according to the Geneva Convention that all of these countries signed, it is a humanitarian burden that should be shared by every signatory state.
Cyril Vanier, that term of blackmail that the viewer used on the hashtag F24debate, we heard it also used by the head of the opposition HDP party in Turkey.
Look, as I said earlier, I think Turkey recognizes that it currently has leverage that it can bring to bear on the European Union. So you call it what you want, blackmail or something else. This is how negotiations work. You know, it's a power struggle. Who has more leverage on whom? And in this case, Turkey arguably has more leverage than the European Union because they have a vast stock. I'm sorry for putting it this way, but that's what it is. A vast stock of refugees, 2.7 million, that they could potentially, unleash on the European Union. And they know how damaging this is politically for the EU. So I think that's the reality. Whether you want to say that it's something akin to blackmail or not, I mean, it's certainly within that family. Let's just say it's a negotiation. But François, I'd like to get back to the point that was being made earlier by François Zaman, and he said, look, if you close one route, you're going to open up another one. Just by the very nature of migration flows, this is what's going to happen, and potentially you're going to open up a more dangerous one. I understand François Zaman's argument. I would like to ask him this question, which is, François, what would you do and what would you have Europe do? And I would like you to take into consideration the political realities of Europe, which is that you have at least 10 countries that have essentially already closed their borders. And they will not overturn that policy, whatever Angela Merkel says. So you know that half of Europe currently wants to close its borders. What political solution can you find other than saying, okay, we are going to close this border, we're going to make peace within the European family, and we're going to try and regulate the flow starting from Turkish soil?
Well, we all agree that it's not an easy issue and that the solution, there is not a kind of recipe that would fix it all. What I would do, number one, I would appoint Angela Merkel as the head of the European Commission or as the head of the European Council. I think she's been thoroughly the voice of reason on this crisis in the EU. Number two, I would establish safe passage and safe route for
by the way, that's
refugees.
not what the French Prime Minister thinks. Because
Clearly, I think he did a very shameful declaration.
when he was in
completely out of
Munich,
place when he was visiting many.
It's not politically expedient to do that. It's
So,
just not realistic.
Number two, I would open safe passage through Europe, which means that I would ask European countries to deliver humanitarian visas so that refugees can come to Europe by plane rather than by boats, which would kill the smuggling industry and which would save a lot of lives
That's what the EU is
in the
currently
Mediterranean.
offering to do. This is that is part of the current deal.
Humanitarian visas clearly at the moment are being given drop by drop. Only a few hundreds have been done. I would welcome the idea that the EU could do more. Three, I would harmonize the asylum systems in the 28 European countries. At the moment, we have an addition of 28 asylum systems that have nothing in common, which is unfair for both the refugees, the asylum seekers, and the countries on the southern shore of Europe. And number four, I would put in place a centralized asylum system in the EU. It is about time that the EU develops a common asylum policy which should be dealt with directly by the European Commission.
All right, more reactions coming in. This one on the hashtag F24 debate. The EU must relieve pressure from Greece, but also a long-term settlement needs to be considered. Long-term settlement is what we're talking about. Now, this word of blackmail that we mentioned is also because before this Monday summit in Brussels, authorities in Turkey seizing Zaman, the country's largest daily newspaper. We can show you the front page of the English language version after the raid. Shameful day for free press in Turkey. Zaman media group seized, with the front page in black. Now that's since been replaced with flattering stories about President Erdogan's planned reception to mark International Women's Day, his visit to the site of a bridge being built across the Bosphorus Strait in Istanbul. What's the story? Because I noticed the French language version of Zaman is updated, whereas the English language one hasn't been since Friday.
Yeah, well, the French version of Zaman is still independent from Erdogan's power. We will continue to do our job freely, but my colleagues in Turkey, they are fighting against the new administration, and the first job of the new administration of Zaman was to delete all the archive of Zaman newspaper, online archive, and they shut down all the services. They are not able, my colleagues are not able to reach their mail accounts, their news archives. So it has been a really difficult 3 days for my colleagues, and at least 100 of them are already fired. And I believe that we have in Zaman Media Group, we have 1,000 people working, and they will all be fired within months. So that's what happened 4 months ago. The Turkish government seized another media group, İpek Media Group, with own two TV channels and 2 newspapers. Last week, they gone to the bankruptcy and they shut down on the TV channels and the newspapers. And that's what will they do with the Zaman media group.
All right, this was, of course, weighing on the minds as that summit began in Brussels this Monday. France's president among the European leaders denouncing the seizure of Zaman.
Cooperating with Turkey does not mean that we accept everything that Turkey does. Specifically, we must be extremely vigilant on certain measures that were taken concerning the press. Press freedom must be respected everywhere, including in Turkey.
Cyril Vanier, can there really be a deal to waive visa requirements for Turks, which, as we said, would be a huge political win for Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the context of what we've just been discussing, that crackdown on opposition newspapers?
Well, François, we don't yet know the answer to that question. We may have a clearer idea by this evening, but you're absolutely right to ask it because, of course, this is going to be key. This evening might tell us just how far Europe is willing to go and how much of its core fundamental values it is willing to sacrifice in order to get what could be at best a short or medium term fix to this migrant crisis. So in other words, is it going to sacrifice values of, which are fundamental tenets of European values, freedom of the press, individual liberties? Can it just sacrifice those in order to get a deal on Turkey? François Hollande seemed to have major issues with that. Other countries do. Angela Merkel's own ruling party, the CDU, also has serious misgivings about the way the Turkish president, has been behaving recently. This is only going to obviously strengthen their case against Erdogan. I think it's a double-edged sword for Turkey to have done this just before the EU summit because it is really raising alarm bells with EU leaders here that they could essentially lose their soul if they don't address this issue swiftly and if they don't address this issue with force. And when Turkey is saying that it wants to fast-track its EU membership, bear in mind it's going to want to open more chapters, as we call them in Brussels, and the chapters concerning media and the press and individual liberties could actually end up becoming a hindrance for Turkey towards joining the EU.
François Zaman, the man who moments ago nominated Angela Merkel to be the EU EU Commission president, this is the same Angela Merkel who went to Ankara just before a snap general election, which was seen by many as a boost for Erdogan. Is Merkel turning a blind eye to what's going on inside of Turkey?
That's difficult to say at the moment. I think that we need to consider also the fact that Germany has a very large stock of Turkish immigrants and that the German-Turkey relationship is extremely important, not just for Turkey, but also for the Turkish immigrants who are in Germany. And this is something that needs, of course, to be considered. And I think that is also something that will weigh in Angela Merkel's position towards Turkey.
Well, we can at least say that Erdogan sees Merkel's approach as a green light to his own political agenda, which is some sort of despotic administration. If you look at, I believe that there's a direct correlation between what's going on since 4 months, just after Angela Merkel's first visit. 17 TV channels have been shut down in 4 months. There are more than 300 journalists have been detained because of insult to the president, with the motive of insult to the president, and we have 31 journalists in prison. There is a direct correlation between the crackdown on media and also the crackdown on Kurds and these refugee talks.
And Cyril Vanier was asking about the timing. Is it a coincidence, the fact that this happened just 2 days before this summit, this crackdown at Zaman?
Absolutely not. It was some sort of a slap into the face of European values, European leaders.
What's the reasoning
He
then?
is testing,
if you're saying it's a slap, what's the reasoning?
But because Donald Tusk, the president of European Council, was in town, he was in Istanbul, he was in Ankara, while the police were attacking the readers of Zaman, and he tweeted that we had a fruitful conversation with the President Erdogan. So. I believe that there is a message. We expected, as a journalist who is working for Zaman, I expected a crackdown on my media group since 2 years. It's not a surprise. We didn't expect this kind of violence, but we did expect a kind of intervention. So it came 2 days ago, 3 days ago from this summit, this crucial historic summit. So it was a message for Erdogan. In his mind, it is a political message given to the European leaders. You have to deal with this. It is clear as that. And the problem is that I don't approach this question as an ethics problem or a principle problem. Media freedom is key right now in Turkey. We have 50% of the population who does not vote for Erdogan. A lot of them even hates Erdogan, and then they don't have a media. There are only 2 TV channels with really modest financial conditions who still goes on, and 2 newspapers. After all, the media completely has been broken down. I think that Zaman, the takeover of Zaman, was the fatal blow, the death blow to the Turkish media.
Başak Yavcan, do you agree that Recep Tayyip Erdogan chose his moment carefully and that it was timed to coincide with this summit, this seizure of Zaman newspaper?
Well, it is definitely, the freedom of press is definitely a big concern for everyone in Turkey and outside as well. But let's take a step back and let's really see when this normative power of Europe has disappeared and when did we cross that bridge initially. And we need to go really back for this and look at the time when the Commission froze 8 chapters of the acquis, and Cyprus, in addition, put a veto on opening 6 more chapters. So over the years,
for EU membership
we did not see
EU.
any of the engagement. Exactly, we did not see much of an engagement. And as brought by earlier, put forward, the European Commission, right before the Turkish general national elections, announced quite unexpectedly that it had postponed its annual progress report on Turkey amid a key visit of the Turkish officials.
Is it realistic to be talking about EU membership when it's closing down newspapers?
I think this is exactly the time to talk about EU membership and re-engaging of Turkey with the European Union, because the argument I'm trying to make is if we are complaining about this freedom of press violations and freedom of speech violations, we need to look back and see the deterioration, put some blame on the deterioration of the relations on the EU. And if we need to have progress on this, maybe the best way is to accelerate the negotiations and bring solutions to the problems as we go, when the prospect of EU membership is actually a realistic prospect for Turkey.
Cyril Vanier, back in 2007, when then candidate for president Nicolas Sarkozys ran in this country, he made it emphatic that Turkey would never be an EU member. And some are haunted by that, saying that by shutting the door on Turkey, that has pushed Turkey away.
And you know, Nicolas Sarkozy has not changed his line one iota. In fact, he doubled down today. His opposition party, the Republicans, as it's known in France, made it clear today that that was a red line as far as it was concerned. In other words, Turkey joining the EU was a red line for the French opposition party led by Nicolas Sarkozy. So he really hasn't changed his line. What I think we need to stress is that the membership towards the EU and the entire process that leads toward accession to the EU is a very lengthy process. It's been going on for 10 years. And whatever Turkey does now, whether it endears itself to the European Union or whether, on the contrary, it gives the skeptics more of an argument to keep it out of the bloc, nothing is going to be resolved, in the coming weeks or in the coming months. And Ankara knows that. So Ankara can at best hope for political symbolism. And for, President Erdogan would no doubt like to turn around and say, look, I got this from Europe. I got them to fast track our membership bid. But he knows nothing's going to happen in the coming months. So some of this, and I think we need to stress that, is political theater on both sides as far as Turkey's EU membership bid is concerned.
Emre Demir?
Well, I believe that Erdogan does not care about European Union membership. He aspires a Putin-style political regime, so he doesn't care about EU membership. It's just a political theater. He wants to use all of this as a political theater.
We have a comment on the hashtag F24 debate. Turkey wants the EU flooded with refugees as payback for not being allowed to join. And that argument has been put forth, that if the EU had engaged Turkey more, maybe Turkey's human rights record would be better. Do you agree?
Well, it was Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozys who pushed back Turkey.
If you can't join them, beat them.
Well, I don't know if you Turkey are trying to beat Europe, but back then it was a different political atmosphere. Turks wanted to enter the European Union. The Turkish government, Erdogan government, wanted to be a part of Europe. Since then, a lot have changed, and I don't believe that Erdogan believes the European project. He wants a political regime for himself, an Iron Fist leader. So he's just outsourcing a problem. Europe is outsourcing its problem to Erdogan, and Erdogan wants Turkey to himself. That's it.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Emre Demir, I want to thank you. I want to thank Başak Yavcan for being with us from Ankara, Cyril Vanier in Brussels, who will be following until it finishes, of course, that EU summit for us, and François Zaman, thank you for being with us. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. Enter Emma James.
Hi there.
So we've had a day of surprises in Brussels.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we're still waiting to see exactly how this all shakes down. But certainly this French cartoonist doesn't think that just throwing cash at the problem is necessarily the answer. Now, this, of course, is about the fact that the EU offered to give Greece more money to cope. And as you see, there's a sort of Greek godlike figure there trying to keep a boatload of migrants aloft, a few of them dropping by the wayside.
That is so key. We've put a lot of focus in our discussion on Turkey. But the point is that under the current rules, it's Greece that's like Atlas shouldering the burden.
Exactly. And the EU there saying, take it. But of course, if you were to do that, then all would be lost. Now, if we take a look at The Guardian, they too have a fairly doom-laden article talking about whether or not these talks in Brussels are going to succeed. He talks about Donald Tusk's migration magic trick undermined by flawed logic. Now, this article is actually written by Patrick Kingsley, who is the migration correspondent for The Guardian.
They have a migration correspondent.
It's incredible. It's something that you just couldn't have imagined a few months ago, but now it seems like such a necessity. Now, what he talks about is when it comes to closing the Balkans route, Tusk, the President of the European Council, is acting with all the confidence of a magician at the circus. He says that this idea of a two-pronged attack, closing the Greek-Macedonian border and also trying to strong-arm Turkey into taking back some, if not all, of those who arrive on Greek islands, he just doesn't believe it'll work. He says, yes, the logic is straightforward, but it doesn't reflect the reality of the situation. He says migrants will find other ways to complete their journeys. Where there is a wall, there is usually a way of getting around it, he says.
Another story you've been following for us, and it's one that made waves in this country over the weekend. France's highest honor, I guess the equivalent of an OBE, the Légion d'honneur, awarded to somebody, and not everyone here agrees about it.
No, very much not. And it is really getting a lot of global attention. Your Middle East reporting on this one about the fact that France has awarded its top honour to the Saudi prince discreetly, it says. Others prefer to use the term secretly because this was all done with no great fanfare from the Elysee Palace. If we take a look at Sputnik, the news website, they're even harsher with their headline, honour for sale, they ask. And basically, the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Nayef, was apparently given the award for his efforts in the fight against terrorism and extremism, a common protocol practice, according to an aide for François Hollande. Now, Jean-Marc Ayrault went on national radio this morning to defend what had happened, and what he basically said is it's a diplomatic tradition, that sometimes these traditions politicians shock, but that's just how it is. Now, people simply not accepting that's how it is, or indeed that's how it should be. Kenneth Roth, the executive director of Human Rights Watch, says execution spree is no obstacle to France honouring Saudi Crown Prince with Légion d'honneur. And lots of people talking about the number of executions being carried out in Saudi Arabia, 70 so far this year, which is a phenomenal number. And lots of people really very distressed by it. A lot of French people using the hashtag honte, which means shame. This Twitter user says, distressed that François Hollande gave the Légion d'honneur to a Saudi for his legions of horrors, as she says, a nice little play on words. Other Twitter users too pointing to other human rights offences committed by Saudi Arabia. This recalling the fate of Raif Badawi, the blogger who's been sentenced to 1,000 lashes and 10 years in jail. It is deeply shocking to many people. And also on the international stage, you have no idea how disappointing it is to us in Yemen, seeing the French leader grovelling with the slimeball Saudi regime.
All right. Unmitigated opinion there. Many thanks, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.